Sunshine, blue skies, please go away.
That's when I used to have to walk Melvin Franklin home.
What really happened to David Ruffin? It's been 23 years since he passed away, yet questions still linger about his final days. Ruffin's family has finally come forward to address the rumors.
I understand he was out in California, out in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, but he was begging, and the guys gave him a little bit of money just to get rid of it.
Why did it take so long for the truth to be revealed? Could this new information change how fans remember him? Let's dive into the life and legacy of David Ruffin and find out what his family has now confirmed.
Me and Marvin used to pack records for Anna Records. My first record was on Vega Records with Tommy Smalls.
David Ruffin was born on January 18, 1941, in a small place called Wynot, Mississippi. It was a quiet area, and David grew up in a family that valued hard work and faith. His full name was Davis Eli Ruffin. His father, Eli Ruffin, was a Baptist preacher, and his mother, Ophelia, worked at home. David had 3 siblings, a sister named Rita Mae and 2 brothers, Quincy and Jimmy. Another sister, Rosine, sadly passed away shortly after she was born, which was a hard time for the family.
Sunshine, blue skies, please go away.
David's family had deep connections to the South. His father worked as a truck driver at lumber mills around the area. Growing up, David's life was not easy. His father, Eli, was very strict. He believed in strong discipline, and at times he used harsh methods to teach his children right from wrong. This was difficult for David and his siblings, but it was also common in some families at that time. When David was still a baby, his mother, Ophelia, died because of problems from childbirth. Her passing was hard on the family, but later Eli remarried a woman named Erlane, who was a school teacher in 1942. Music was a big part of David's life from the start. His father and stepmother ran a family gospel singing group. They traveled to different places, singing at churches and gatherings. This meant that David and his siblings were around music all the time. David and his brother Jimmy, who would also become a famous singer, stood out because of their strong voices. Sadly, David's father was tough on the family and sometimes abusive, especially when it came to their music. He pushed David and Jimmy to perform well, and the brothers tried to make him proud through their singing. As David got older, he started singing on his own too. He performed in church choirs and joined local talent shows where people noticed how powerful his voice was. This early experience gave him a chance to practice his singing and build confidence. Despite his hard childhood, music became David's way of expressing himself and showing his talent. This love for music would eventually lead him to great fame as one of the lead singers for the Temptations.
And I used to work for Pop Gordy, Barry's father, and physically labor, I have built Motown with my hands. Yeah.
When David Ruffin was just 14 years old, he left home with big dreams. Raised in a family with strong faith, David set out for Memphis, Tennessee, under the care of a minister named Eddie Bush. He planned to become a preacher and help spread messages of hope. But David's journey took an unexpected turn that would lead him toward a life of music. Only a year later, at age 15, David found himself in Hot Springs, Arkansas. There, he met a jazz musician named Phineas Newborn Sr., who had a big impact on him. David started calling himself Little David Bush, using his guardian's last name. He performed in talent shows and even took up an interesting job working with horses at a jockey club. Around this time, he also joined a gospel group called the Dixie Nightingales. David's love for performing was growing, and he soon got the chance to sing with the Soul Stirrers, a gospel group that had become famous after Johnny Taylor left the band.
And then that's when I used to have to walk Melvin Franklin home.
David began looking up to singers who had moved from gospel to popular music, like Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson. He was inspired by the success they found in the world of secular music, songs that didn't focus on religious themes. By the time David turned 16, he decided he wanted to take a similar path. With the help of Eddie Bush and his wife, Dorothy Helen, David moved to Detroit, Michigan, where his older brother Jimmy was already working both in music and at the Ford Motor Company. Detroit was a busy city full of opportunities, especially in music. With the Bush family's support, David recorded his first songs, You and I and Believe Me, in 1958. These were released by a record company called Vega Records.
Oh, you and I.
David used the stage name Little David Bush for these early records, proudly adopting his guardian's last name. He later said that during this time, he was experimenting with a style that was softer and more like the pop and R&B sounds popular in the late 1950s. In 1957, David had an important encounter with Berry Gordy Jr., a young songwriter who dreamed of starting his own music label. Berry's father had a contracting business and hired David to help build a studio that would later be called Hitsville, USA, the home of Motown Records. David was helping to build the very place that would change music history. Around the same time, David's brother Jimmy joined Tamla's Miracle Records, one of Berry Gordy's first record labels.
And Berry started Motown, and Billy Davis and Anna Gordy was Anna Records.
David wasn't alone in his music journey in Detroit. He became friends with Marvin Gaye. David learned a lot from Marvin while working at Anna Records, a label run by Berry Gordy's sister, Gwen Gordy Fuqua, and her partner, Billy Davis. David and Marvin supported each other as they navigated the music world. In a later interview, Gwen Gordy Fuqua shared her memories of David and praised his work ethic. She remembered David as a polite, respectful man who always used words like "yes, ma'am" and "no, ma'am." She said David had a rare quality. He rehearsed as if he were already performing in front of an audience. He was one of the only artists I've seen who rehearsed like he was on stage, Gwen recalled. This dedication would later help him become one of Motown's biggest stars.
Sunshine, blue skies, please go away.
Ruffin's path to becoming the lead singer of The Temptations began with his older brother Jimmy Ruffin. Jimmy was also a singer and joined the Motown Revue Tour, where he met The Temptations. At that time, The Temptations were a popular local group in Detroit and were searching for a new singer. Jimmy, knowing David's talent, quickly told him about this chance. Excited by the opportunity, David reached out to Otis Williams, one of the founding members of The Temptations, who also lived in Detroit, to express his interest in joining the group. In January 1964, David officially became a member of The Temptations, taking the place of Al Bryant, one of the original members. David's first recording session with The Temptations happened on January 9, 1964. Before that, both David and Jimmy had auditioned for the group, but David's strong performance, especially at their New Year's Eve party in 1963, won him the spot. Initially, David mostly sang background vocals, while Eddie Kendricks and Paul Williams handled the lead parts. During that first year, David recorded a few lead vocals, but the record label didn't release them because they thought those songs didn't fully show off his voice.
You're clinging to me tighter than you ever.
Then came Smokey Robinson, a well-known producer and songwriter. Smokey noticed something special in David's voice, describing it as both smooth and a bit rough, a unique sound he thought could make David a star. Smokey started working on a song that would bring out the best in David's voice. This song was My Girl. Recorded in November 1964 and released soon after, My Girl was an instant success. By 1965, it became The Temptations' first #1 song and their biggest hit. This song changed everything for David Ruffin. He became the lead singer in the face of The Temptations, and My Girl remains one of their most famous songs. Thanks to this song, David's career took off, and he became a huge part of The Temptations' success. But behind his success, Ruffin struggled with personal issues, especially drug addiction, which led to his exit from the band.
Okay, my question is to Otis. Why was David Ruffin fired from The Temptations?
In the 1960s, Ruffin's addiction to cocaine slowly started to affect his life and career. At first, it wasn't a big problem, but as the years went on, his drug use increased. By 1967, Ruffin had gone to rehab for the first time, as his drug problems were starting to take a toll on him. According to his friend Linster Butch Merle, Ruffin was using drugs so often that he was losing weight and looked extremely thin and frail, Merle even described him as a walking skeleton. Around the same time, Daryl Hall from the band Hall & Oates shared how, in the 1980s, Ruffin was spending time with people who encouraged his drug use. Ruffin's addiction led him to miss rehearsals and performances, which frustrated the rest of the group. In 1967, the Supremes, another popular Motown group, changed their name to Diana Ross and the Supremes to highlight their lead singer, Diana Ross. Ruffin wanted something similar for the Temptations. He wanted the group to be known as David Ruffin and the Temptations, hoping to make himself the center of attention. However, the group's unofficial leader, Otis Williams, didn't agree. This caused friction between Ruffin and Williams.
Well, you see, when we first started out, we made a vow that we would not change, because we had heard about Frankie Lyman leaving the Teenagers and Tony Williams leaving the Platters, so we made...
Ruffin also started questioning the group's finances, wanting a detailed breakdown of their earnings. This led to more tension, especially with Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown Records. Ruffin's behavior took a turn when he skipped a Temptations concert in Cleveland to attend a show with his new girlfriend, Barbara Gail Martin.
And when you are a group, you have to move and think as one unit. You cannot have five guys going, 5 different directions.
This was the last straw for the group, and they decided to part ways with him.
A vow, but it's one thing to hold true to that vow once, you start to make huge amounts of money and doors open up to you that once would never. And, you're getting all kind of adulation, and success can act as a very strong aphrodisiac.
After Ruffin left the Temptations, Dennis Edwards, a friend of the group, replaced him. Though Ruffin encouraged Edwards to take his place, he wasn't ready to let go completely. During Edwards' first few performances, Ruffin would unexpectedly show up at Temptations concerts. When the group began singing songs like My Girl, Ruffin would step onto the stage, take the microphone from Edwards, and start performing. Fans loved it, but the group found it embarrassing. At one point, the group considered letting Ruffin back in, especially because the fans adored him. However, when Ruffin was late to a comeback show in Gaithersburg, Maryland, they decided to keep Edwards and leave Ruffin out of the lineup. Ruffin's drug use and lifestyle also led to legal and financial issues. He was once arrested in Memphis for causing a disturbance during a birthday party. The police said he refused to leave when asked and allegedly threatened officers. Though Ruffin denied making threats, he faced a fine of $5,000 and a short prison sentence in Terre Haute, Indiana, due to unpaid taxes of over $310,000 from the mid-1970s. He served 4 months before being released early for good behavior. In 1986, Ruffin faced another charge when he was found with a stolen handgun worth less than $100. He was fined $50 with an additional $100 in court costs. The same year, he was arrested in Detroit for cocaine possession, and though he was found not guilty of having the drugs with intent to sell, he was convicted of using them. As punishment, Ruffin was sentenced to probation and community service. Due to his repeated probation violations, he eventually had to complete a 28-day rehab program at the Araba Kazriel Institute in New York in 1989. Ruffin's battle with addiction lasted many years, deeply affecting his health. Otis Williams, in his book about the band, recalled the last time he saw Ruffin, which was backstage at a Las Vegas concert just months before Ruffin's passing. He described Ruffin's appearance as sunken and emaciated, noting that drugs had taken a serious toll on his former friend. Williams sadly admitted that when he saw Ruffin that night, he feared Ruffin's days were numbered. Despite his fame and his role in one of the most beloved bands in history, his addiction became too strong to overcome. Aside from his drug addictions, David had ups and downs, especially when it came to relationships, children, and domestic abuse. David got married for the first time to Sandra Barnes. Together, they had 3 daughters, Cheryl, Nedra, and Kimberly. Family life seemed good, but like many relationships, it faced challenges. David later became a father again with his long-term girlfriend, Yenna Sapaya. They had a son named David E. Sapaya, but David Ruffin changed his name to David Ely Ruffin, Jr. This change was a way for him to connect more with his son. For many years, David, Yenna, and their son lived together, forming a family unit, even without a formal marriage. David married Joy Hamilton. This marriage was also rocky. Joy would later face struggles because of David's behavior. After David passed away, Jenna added Ruffin to her name to honor their relationship and keep a connection with their son. In 2003, she wrote a memoir titled, A Memoir, David Ruffin, My Temptation. In this book, she opened up about David's unfaithfulness and his abusive behavior toward her. David also had a high-profile relationship with Tammy Terrell, a talented singer who joined the Motown Revue. Their relationship was passionate but troubled. David even proposed to Tammy, but things took a turn when she announced their engagement on stage, only to discover that he was still married to someone else. As David struggled with drug abuse, his behavior became more violent. This led to Tammy ending their relationship after a serious incident where David hit her in the head with his motorcycle helmet. Tammy had suffered from migraines since she was a child. In an interview with Ebony magazine, she mentioned that her relationship with David made her headaches worse. Sadly, Tammy died from a brain tumor in 1970, and many believe her difficult relationship with David played a part in her health struggles.
You're clinging to me tighter than you ever.
David Ruffin's transition into a solo career was full of ups and downs. After working with the Temptations for years, he struggled with his record label, Motown, wanting to break free and understand his finances. Ruffin even took legal action against Motown to leave, but they countersued to keep him. Eventually, they reached an agreement, and Ruffin had to stay with Motown until his contract ended. Interestingly, he already had a solo contract when he joined the Temptations, which may have created some tension in the group. In 1969, Ruffin finally released his first solo single, My Whole World Ended, The Moment You Left Me. This song was originally planned for the Temptations, but it became a big hit for Ruffin on his own. The song reached the top 10 on both the US pop and R&B charts. Building on this success, he released an album called Feeling Good that same year. He also recorded another album called David in 1970 and 1971. But Motown didn't release it until 2004, years after his death. During his solo career, Ruffin also teamed up with his brother, Jimmy Ruffin, to create an album called I Am My Brother's Keeper. This album featured a few minor hits, including When My Love Hand Comes Tumbling Down and Your Love Was Worth Waiting For. However, after a strong start, Ruffin's solo career began to lose steam. His last big hit came in 1975 with the song Walk Away From Love, which reached number 9 on the US pop chart and number 10 in the UK. This song was a major success, selling over 1 million copies and earning Ruffin a gold record from the Recording Industry Association of America, ARIAA. Once his contract with Motown ended, Ruffin signed with Warner Brothers Records. He released 2 albums with them called So Soon We Change and Gentleman Ruffin, but neither achieved major success. Even so, Ruffin reunited with Eddie Kendricks, another former member of the Temptations, and the two friends began recording and performing together. They even rejoined the Temptations in the early 1980s to create an album called Reunion and went on tour. This tour included a hit song called Standing on the Top, produced by Rick James. However, the tour didn't last long, as Ruffin missed several shows due to struggles with substance abuse, which led to his final departure from the Temptations. Despite leaving the group, Ruffin continued working with Kendricks. The two formed a duo and toured together. In a special performance, they appeared at the reopening of the Apollo Theater in New York City, performing with the well-known duo Hall & Oates. Their live show was so successful that it was released as a live album. They also performed at the Live Aid concert, where they sang some classic Temptations hits. Later, Ruffin, Kendricks, and another former Temptation, Dennis Edwards, were honored by being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Following this, the three went on tour as Ruffin, Kendrick, Edwards, former leads of the Temptations. Ruffin's solo career may not have been as successful as his time with the Temptations, but he still had several memorable moments and hits.
I understand he was out in California, out in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, but he was begging, and the guys gave him a little bit of money just to get rid of him.
Ruffin tragically passed away on June 1st, 1991. He was only 50 years old when he died due to an accidental drug overdose. The news shocked many people, especially his fans and family. David had just finished a big tour in England with other well-known musicians, Eddie Kendricks and Dennis Edwards, and seemed to be on a positive path. Unfortunately, his life ended unexpectedly after he used crack cocaine. The sad incident took place in West Philadelphia. David was reportedly with his friend Donald Brown at a place where drugs were being used, often referred to as a crack house. David collapsed there after using crack cocaine, and his friend Donald quickly took him to the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. Medical staff worked hard to save his life, but sadly, he was declared dead at 3:55 a.m. The official reason for his death was given as a bad reaction to drugs, specifically cocaine. According to news reports, David and another man named William Nowell had taken a large amount of crack cocaine just hours before his death. They supposedly shared 10 vials of the drug. Although the authorities concluded that his death was an accident, some of David's family and friends thought there might have been more to the story. A major reason for their suspicion was that David's money belt, which reportedly had $40,000 in it, was missing. They believed someone might have taken advantage of him during his final hours. David's girlfriend Diane Showers expressed her sadness, but said she wasn't completely surprised by his passing. Diane had known David since she was a young girl and had always admired him. She mentioned that David would often make choices based on how much money he had at the time, which sometimes led him down difficult paths. David Ruffin's funeral was held in Detroit, his hometown, at the New Bethel Baptist Church. Many famous musicians, including Stevie Wonder and Aretha Franklin, attended and performed songs in his honor. The remaining members of the Temptations also sang their classic hit, My Girl, as a tribute. Michael Jackson, who greatly respected David, offered to pay for the funeral, although he didn't attend. Many celebrities sent flowers, including Diana Ross and Rod Stewart. Today, David Ruffin is laid to rest at Woodlawn Cemetery in Detroit, where his fans still remember him and his unforgettable music.